I know I end up talking a lot about football because I don't go out at night. You know, I got 4 kids and a wife, so I just sit on my couch going, when's the next game going to come on? And and there's a moment that a lot of people were making fun. I don't know why I'm holding my coffee. There's a moment. Welcome to Casual Church, guys. There was a moment that went viral and everybody was making fun of this guy. And Joe Flacco had a really kind of a cool story. He was done. He was not playing football anymore. No one had remembered him at all. And then he ends up on the Browns football team. He's playing quarterback and he's throwing the ball like crazy and throwing interceptions like crazy. And that all kept up all the way through my loss last night. And but there was a moment where he was caught on camera. And he's kind of arms folded, it's cold, and then you just see him kind of like doze off. And then he kind of goes, oh, whoa, okay, we're really blowing through the third quarter right now, all right. And people are making fun of him for falling asleep in the middle of a football game, you know? It's like, dude, you're paid to be here. But here's the deal. Joe Flacco is 1 year older than me, and he has one more child than I do. I felt that so bad, I was like, I know it, man. Right? Yeah, get your naps when you can get them. You know what I mean? Like, he's not playing defense. He doesn't have to be awake the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you're a dad in your 30s, you're just kind of like, I can't. You just kind of, you know, you're like, more coffee. I just got, where's my oxygen machine? You know, because you're just like, I'm tired. These kids got me tired. You know what I mean? And what happened when I saw that video, I didn't criticize the man. I thought, I have a new best friend. I have someone who understands me. He doesn't know who I am, and I don't really know him, but man, I do identify with that. And one of the weird things, we're doing our series, it's a 2-week series to start our week, our year off, and it's kind of our vision series, and it's not really a vision series in the sense that here's our strategy, and blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of, here's some things we're going to emphasize this year about church life that I don't want us to miss. If we're going to miss some things, okay, but here's something I really want us to emphasize. And it's our theme, our vision for the year is growing in friendship with God and friendship with each other. That's our theme. That's what we're going to focus on and try to work out. And one of the things about friendship is that moment where you go, oh, you too? I thought I was the only one. Oh, you do that like you fall asleep at a football game just like I do. Very cool. And you think, okay, I can become friends with this person because he understands something, or he likes something, or he gets a little too involved in this, that, or the other, just like I get a little too involved about that, and we can identify with that with each other. And that's why I have a new best friend. And I don't care about Taylor Swift at football games. I care about Joe Flacco at football games, okay? And so the question that we're doing to start off this year is we're asking the question, how do we grow in friendship? If that's our theme, if that's our goal, growing in friendship with God and friendship with each other, the question is, how do we do it? How do we do that? And last week we talked about friendship with God, and we learned that when you and I were created, the very beginning of everything, God created the heavens and the earth. We learned about this last week, and God created a world in which we could have relationships with God and relationships with each other. That we were not created to be alone. We were not created to just have no connections beyond just the mirror, right? And what we said was that that Satan came into the garden and he poisoned the minds of Adam and Eve. He said, no, God doesn't really love you. He doesn't really want what's best for you. He doesn't really want you to have good things. He just wants to keep his knowledge and his power and his wisdom to himself. And he knows that if you would eat the apple of this tree, you would be just like God, right? Remember that he just poisoned their minds. And it drove a wedge between us and God, and it ultimately drove a wedge between us and each other, where people started pointing fingers. And what we said last week was this: when Satan attacked them in the garden, I think it's true today, when he attacks us today, he attacks us at the 2 most important areas of our lives. He attacks our relationship with God, and he attacks our relationship with each other, trying his best to drive a wedge between us every chance he gets. And here's our verse that told us this, that the reason we think this is the most important area is because Jesus came along one day and he said this. He was asked, what's the greatest command? And he said, the Lord replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Because all the law and all the prophets hang on these two commands. This is, right, we said this last week, that the law, every law that came out there, everything, every command, every message the prophets gave, all of it, it was the suit. But these two commands were the hanger. It all was draped on this. It didn't make sense without the loving God and loving each other aspect. And so this week we're talking about friendship with each other. Last week we talked about how we can go about trying to build our friendship with God. And the reason I wanted to augment the greatest commands and augment this aspect of love God and love each other into friendship with God and friendship with each other is because I think sometimes we can kind of get in ruts in our thinking, right? If we change it a little bit, maybe it jogs our minds and our thinking just enough to where we can kind of be creative in the way we think about interacting with God in ways we've never done so before. And so today we're talking about friendship with each other. And the weird thing about augmenting, the greatest commands is that it sounds unspiritual. And there's always the danger that you may have changed it to where it's not saying what it is. But here's the deal. I believe that our ability to have friendships together and with God are more spiritual than you would like to think. I believe that if this is a church and that would just decide, hey, I'm not going to worry about friendships in this room. I'm not going to worry about building friendships with people in my life. I'm not going to worry about my friends knowing I come here or anything like that. That's not an area I'm going to worry about. If that's what our church is, it would not matter how good our band plays. It wouldn't matter how clever our outreach programs are. It wouldn't matter how cool our kids' ministries are. None of that would matter, because the friendships in the room would not be there. That's my contention. That's my belief, that it's actually that important. We could have our elder Steve come up here and read the Bible in the Greek every single week, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't do nearly as much, no offense to Steve personally, but it would not do nearly as much as being people who build friendships with each other. The Bible says it is not good for a man to be alone. And there's some classic verses about friendship. It says there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Two are better than one. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. By its very nature, friendship is super important. And the older you get, the older I get, let me just say it about me, the older I get, the more I can understand why people kind of go, it's a little more trouble than it's worth. They take time. They take energy. We've been let down by friends. We have had friends do us wrong. We've had friends that we spent a ton of time into and they just kind of came to nothing. And you got a family, you got a job, you got a career, you got kids. And the more I spend time with my family, and I'm a dad with a wife and I have kids, and I'm sitting here and I'm going, my family, my kids are the coolest people on earth. And I understand to be like, I have this thing here and I don't need anything beyond it, but I do. And we do. And here's what's amazing about this verse. It says, love your neighbor as yourself. This is why I think it's so important when we talk about friendship and anything else like this. This is G.K. Chesterton was a guy who's about, 20 years older than C.S. Lewis. So if you know how old C.S. Lewis was, that's about that timeline. But he had a great insight about this verse, love your neighbor as yourself. He says, the brilliant thing here is that God did not say, love humanity. He said, love people, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor. Humanity is a nameless, faceless mass out there somewhere that's kind of easy to love. I want what's best for people, and I think it should go this way, and I think that, whatever. But he goes, your neighbor's not just a nameless, faceless person. Your neighbor has a personality. Your neighbor can't quite get his car on his driveway. Your neighbor has a dog just the exact size of a football that's loud, and you'd kind of like to put through a field goal. You know what I mean? I'm joking. Be mature, everybody. Be mature. Sorry. That's your neighbor, right? Your neighbor, there's personalities at play when we talk about one-to-one, face-to-face, name-to-name. There's personalities at play. And And see, and G.K. Chesterton was really on to something when he said, God's talking, it's not good enough just to say love humanity, but to love your neighbor, your person who you can actually name and sit next to at work and everything else. There's a historian named Paul Johnson. He's just a really prolific historian, but he had a really interesting book he wrote called Intellectuals. And in this book, he wrote brief histories on the sort of intellectuals that made the world we live in, right? Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Karl Marx and Tolstoy and these people. And he just said, here's how they were, and here's how their lives were. This is how they lived their lives. And what he shows is that all these people that had this great hope to shape the world, they had a great idea of how the world should work, and people should be this way, and they should follow these rules, and they should do these things, and they all wanted to shape the world in the image of their brilliance so they could be better for everybody involved. And what he showed is that these people were real pieces of work. They were not great people. They had a tendency to just burn every bridge they ever had. They torpedoed every friendship they ever had. They ruined lives as quickly as they could possibly get in touch with them. And Paul Johnson had this really amazing line to say about them for several of them. And he says this: they loved humanity, but they hated people. They had this great hope to help and be a person who shaped humanity, but every one-to-one relationship with their neighbor, they would torpedo it, they would burn the bridges. By the time their friends were coming to their senses going, I can't do this anymore, it didn't matter because they were already buddy-buddy with a new friend who's willing to put up with the shenanigans or whatever, and it just sort of, okay, I don't care that we're not, I'm on to the next one type thing. And Jesus is going, I'm not asking just for that sort of thing. I want you to love your neighbor. And when we're talking about friendship with each other, we're not talking about some sort of theoretical thing that happens on paper. No. How can we build friendship in this room? And the first thing I want you to think about with friendship is this formula we're going to kind of add on to a little later. It goes like this. Friendship is me plus you. Me plus you equals friendship. It's actual people actually in the room together, actually doing stuff. Yeah, right, yeah. You thought, yeah. Oh, we're talking about friendship, that'd be easy, yeah. And C.S. Lewis is a really interesting writer. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of C.S. Lewis, and he wrote a book called The Four Loves. He wrote an entire chapter on the idea of friendship, and it's just a fascinating read if you have the time to do it. But what he says is that as people, this me plus you aspect of friendship happens as you come to be part of my life and I come to be part of your life, and there's these personalities come together. There are actually sort of reactions that happen. Parts of me, parts of my personality show up one day because it reacts a certain way with your personality. So we all have a friend who this one aspect of my life kind of just flares up and shows up when that friend's in the room, and almost none of my other friends have access to. And so this is why actually by its nature, friendships is different than like mother-child or husband-wife, where we're kind of going, hey, let's get just the two of us together, or let's just have, it's a closed group. But friendship is an open group. This is why it's good to have more friends come on in. Why? Because more friends allow us to have more aspects of our personality show up. And it doesn't need to be just sort of exclusive or whatever. And so here's the deal. Here's what he says. He says, in each of my friends, there is something that only some other friend can fully bring about. But myself, I am not large enough to call the whole person into being, into activity. Now that Charles is dead, I shall never again see Ronald's reaction to a specifically Charles joke. And this is the fascinating part, because now, like in this situation, he's talking about three friends together hanging out, and in the three of you together, you're kind of sharing. Everyone's kind of sharing the other person. No one's got exclusive claim on either, right? He says this, but now it's just two of them, right? He says, far from having more of Ronald, having him to myself where he's mine and it's just, I don't have to share his conversation time with anybody else. Far from having more of him, now that Charles is away, I have less of Ronald. Because there's a part of Ronald that Charles used to always unlock that's not there anymore. And we've all experienced this. And he says, this is why Dante wrote, here comes another who will augment our loves. Here's another who can kind of be part of the gang and kind of be part of the crew and bring elements that no one else can. And here's a really cool image. It's an image of worship. He says, and this is probably why when Isaiah in his famous prophecy saw the throne room of God, this is probably why you see all the angels shouting, holy, 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 one to another, even though they're singing about God. Because it is this group aspect going, we all share this love for God together, and we're all worshiping, and it's for each other's benefits, but it's to the glory of God. And this is why the Bible even talks about singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to each other. The time of worship is not just a time where I give God his due by saying with my mouth how good he is, which it is that, but it's also this time where you and I can be in a body of believers, like-minded believers, all worshiping the same God, saying, I'm going towards the same person with the same goal. I want to be more like Jesus tomorrow than I was today. And the friendship allows us to draw each other together. We're not just talking about people in general. We're talking about people with names and faces. And this is this collective nature of friendship, this sort of open door kind of policy, shows how counterproductive, this is. I think we all have a tendency to do this, but we're younger kids in high school, middle school, maybe elementary school. What you'll very often see is there's 3 friends together, and then 2 will kind of go, no, we're the in crowd. We're going to peel off. We're going to kind of leave another person out, right? And we're going to, and it's sort of this, yeah, see, we all know what we're talking about, right? The high school, middle school girls are going, yeah, it's still a thing, even though, our preacher has white hair and he's super old and lame. Hey, you don't think so, but all the high school and middle schoolers in our church think that. That's what they think. So I'm not saying what that says about you, but whatever. Okay. Mutually assured destruction. But that's the thing, right? And so what they think is, we've won because now it's just the 2 of us and we've excluded somebody. But in reality, you don't have more of each other, you have less, because that friend is a personality, and that personality is a reaction that creates something in the friendship. Friendship is me plus you. And here's the next thing. Friendship is me plus you plus time. Time spent together. Time actually doing it. You can't just snap your finger and go, here it is, I'm granting my friendship to somebody. Now we do that, that's being outgoing, that's kind of going, yes, here's me, I'm going to kind of put myself out there, but you can't, but true friendship, and the time you actually grow deeper into friendship together takes time to kind of work things out. And it's frustrating for people in our society, by the way. We're the ones that have a struggle with this because we live in a productive society. We live in a work smarter, not harder society. We live in a society that says, I have time for this and I'll grant this time and blah, blah. And we've convinced ourselves that there's such a thing out there called quality time. Right? I don't have a lot of time for you, but the time I do have, it's going to be top shelf, okay? I've been saving it since 93 in my cellar. It's going to come out right now, and it's going to be quality time, okay? And the reason we've convinced ourselves that there's such a thing as quality time is because there kind of is such a thing as quality time, right? Right? If I can grant you some time, but I'm also going to have my face stuck in my phone the whole time, that's just time, right? That's just not really quality time. It's just whatever. But if I put that phone away and we're both hanging out playing cards on the floor or whatever, that's better time, but it's not necessarily quality time. Because quality times are those things you just kind of always remember. You think back on fondly. You kind of go, do you remember the time? And here's the dirty little secret that people Steve's told me this. People tell you this all the time. They'll say this. Look, the only way to get quality time is through quantity time. Time spent together. Just time with each other. So that when those moments do happen, where the depth of friendship can happen, those moments we like to experience can happen, they have the room to bloom. And time is the secret sauce to relationships. Time is the thing that it's indispensable. And you and I, because those of us who are married, we like to joke around, and I do this myself. We like to joke around where you go, man, how's things going? How's the wife? How's whatever? And you go, man, she's just always there, right? Like right? We try. That's like the way we kind of joke about our marriages or whatever. And because we've all been in that moment where it's like we're together, but it's awkwardly silent, and we're just kind of, I don't want to talk to her, and she doesn't want to talk to me, and blah blah blah. And we're tempted to think that the problem in that scenario is the time. We've just had too much time, right? It's just too much. It's just, I don't need this much time. But here's the deal. That's not true. That time is perfectly good. It's the secret sauce. The fact that the always there-ness of marriage is a feature of marriage, not a bug. Marriage gives you this opportunity where you can spend that much time with another person, grow that much together, have your roots grown that closely knit together. Now, if we are having time where we're kind of going, this is just too much, I don't want any more of this, I'd like to, go into a closet or whatever. I don't know what, whatever it is, we have to understand there's something else. There's something else there driving a wedge between us. There's something else tainting that time spent together. The time's not the problem. The problem is we have some sort of friction, some sort of sin between us, some sort of thing that's getting us off the same page. And it's playing out with this time together just feels like an eternity. I can't take anymore. And so if we find ourselves going, this is just too much time, I can't, whatever. The thing we really need to check is what's going on in my heart. What am I doing to affect this relationship so negatively that I don't even want to be around the person right now? Because time is the secret sauce to building friendships. There was a time earlier, a while back, where there's a guy I would get coffee with, hang out. We hung out 4 or 5 times. We get together and just shoot the breeze, talk, get to know each other. And for the entire time, it was just, oh, you work here? Okay, that's cool. Do you like that? Was that a hard thing to learn? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you're from this place. It's just getting to know each other. Okay, it's just kind of throwing darts on a board, seeing if anything sort of is interesting. And we just were talking, and we were doing this or doing that, whatever. And it was all fine. It was all cordial. It was all good. But it was like the very last 10 minutes of the 4th time we were hanging out, I find out, oh, this person's like super into chess. This person's like, learning strategy and getting good and beating computers and that sort of thing. Like, I'm going, how did it take so, why couldn't you just say that at the beginning of it, right? I don't care about your work. You know what I mean? Like say something interesting, but that's just, you can't just snap your finger. You can't just, time is forged, friendship is forged out of the fires of time. And then at some point, something happens and you kind of go, oh, you too? Oh, you're into that too? And then the friendship can kind of bloom because it is friendship. Friendship is you plus me plus time. And you might be asking, Garrett, what does this have to do with church? What does this have to do with spiritual friendships? Because it sounds like you're just talking about friendship. And my first counter to that would be this. Friendship is more spiritual than you think anyways. You are not made to be alone. We were made to have relationships with people. And friendship is this bizarre cross-section, this bizarre moment in the life of the world that doesn't have some sort of necessary aspect to it. You don't need to have as a human race, we don't need friendship in order to get, kids into the next generation, right? We don't need family in order to make sure people get married or whatever. It's just this sort of like voluntary connection we have with other people that is just kind of fun, and our biology is not driving it, our government's not forcing it on us. It's just kind of like it's its own thing. And the reason is because God made us to be relational beings where we can grow in friendship with each other, and it's fun. God didn't make life to be a drudgery, but a joy. And a lot of us, our own sin gets in the way of that joy, but every single time we come back to hear what God's calling us to, we find out, like what we said last week, that when we look into what God has for us, we find that He's not a tyrant, but He's a friend, right? And when He made us to have friendships with each other and gave us a life to live, it was to be a joy. Hopefully, and the hard times come, yeah. But He did make us where we can enjoy this life. And here's what it has to do with spiritual friendships. Every one of us who finds our way into this room are on a journey. We're seeking out God in some way. We're looking into the mysteries of Jesus and His salvation and His resurrection and what it means, and we're trying to figure out how can I live more for God and less for myself and all that sort of stuff. We're all on a journey trying to slowly find our way towards God. And the great news of the gospel is that God came to us, and there's all that aspect, but still, we're on a journey. And what happens in church is you find other people, you find fellow travelers who are on that journey. And friendship is a necessary aspect of us trying to find our way towards the life and the me that God wants me to be. The Apostle Paul has a really interesting story. His narrative arc is a fascinating one, and there's a little aspect of it that we tend to miss. The Apostle Paul, you may know, was born under the name of Saul. He was a Pharisee, and the Pharisees are the people who constantly fought with Jesus, and Paul never met Jesus, but he was a Pharisee. He was of that group. He was a spiritual leader in Judaism. And when the church came about, he realized something that other people didn't realize before him, which was, guys, this is not just another thing under Judaism. It's a different thing altogether. So he tried to kill the church. And he would imprison people, and he got a man named Stephen stoned and all those sorts of things. And he was an enemy of the church. And then God saved him, blinded him on the road to Damascus, threw him off his horse, sent him into 3 days of darkness until he was met by a man, a Christian man who led him to Christ. And then in chapter 9, verse 19, it says this about Saul. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. Verse 20, at once he began to preach in the synagogue that Jesus was the Son of God. It was amazing. It was amazing. The Apostle Paul was a brilliant man. He was a fascinating man. Verse 23 says this, after many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy to kill Saul. Okay, so his preaching made him, so they have to take him and help him get to another place. And it says when he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, so he had Barnabas come and help him. And so it says this, Saul stayed with them, and he moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of Christ, and he talked and debated with the Hellenistic Jews, but they tried to kill him. And when the believers learned of this, they took him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. He's a Christian for a couple of days, and he's already preaching. It's amazing. He's proving that Jesus is the Christ, all that sort of stuff, and yet the churches have to keep sending him away. And now here's what verse 31 says. It says, then the church throughout Judea, Galilee, and Samaria enjoyed a time of peace and was strengthened. Here's what it's saying. The Apostle Paul was brilliant. He was an amazing teacher. He's a great debater. But when they got him out of the room right after he became a Christian, it gave the church peace. He was a blessed subtraction, as we like to say in the South. Why? Well, because he had not yet learned how to just be a Christian in a church full of other Christians living life together. And after a while just being a part of a church somewhere, God says, hey, set apart Barnabas and Saul. I'm going to have them do, and they go on their first missionary journey, and they go on their next, and they go on their next. And in chapter 21, he starts a farewell tour. Every church he visits, he goes, this is going to be the last time I talk to you. This is going to be the last time we see each other. I'm going to Rome, and I'm going to die. It's going to be a whole thing. And far from the church saying, hey, Paul, you're too much, we're just going to ship you off somewhere else. Here's what it says as he tries to leave the church in Ephesus. Chapter 21, verse 1 says this. After we had torn ourselves away from them, we put out to sea and sailed. After we had torn ourselves away from them. What's the difference in those two stories? Paul was always brilliant. He was always an amazing teacher. He always had these insights into the mysteries of God, and he could always talk about what it was like. But the difference was one of relationship. The difference was one of friendship, where he said, these are not just people I'm here to win debates with, but these are people I'm here to be friends with. And when the time came to say goodbye to him, rather than just saying, good riddance, peace, please get out of here, it was a tearing effect. We're losing a friend now that he's leaving. And on our journey, we can't just be, hey, I'm just going to learn the theology. I'm just going to learn the things I need to know. I'm going to learn the points of the faith that are important to me. But no, we have to, along the way, we need to find fellow travelers who will be friends with me and I'll be friends with them, so that hopefully, as iron sharpens iron, you and I can sharpen each other, and slowly, slowly we can become more like Jesus. And hopefully, as we grow in friendship with each other, we will also find ourselves growing in friendship with God. And so here's my request. What time do you have? And I know I've talked to a lot of you. I know you don't have a ton. It's one of our great battles that we have to fight, is the battle for our time. But as a church, we are doing things where we can try to set up and give people avenues. Here's a chance for you to spend time with people. Darren is just running around with his hair caught on fire. He's gone now because he's been on fire for a week now. Putting together a men's group, a men's event, a retreat where we can just spend time together. Time with God and time with each other. We have a youth event coming up in February where we allow our kids time with God and time with each other in these retreats. And we're doing different things that are coming out. And my request to you is not to say yes to all of them, because no one can say yes to everything. But do say yes to some of them. Say yes at times. Say yes to the Super Bowl party if all you have is a Sunday afternoon. Say yes to the retreat, but not to the every single week thing. And hopefully, we will find ourselves growing in friendship with each other, with the end result of growing in friendship with God.